The Kremlin, group of buildings in the center of Moscow that serves as the official seat of the government of Russia. A centuries-old fortress with striking red brick architecture, it is one of the most recognizable government complexes in the world. Though Kremlin means citadel, and though about 30 such complexes survive across Russia, the term has become widely synonymous with Moscow's walled compound. Indeed, the Moscow Kremlin has long been a symbol for Russia itself, having been home to Russian tsars and presidents. Featuring several massive churches, it has also long served as the hub of the Russian Orthodox Church. The Kremlin is a massive complex, encompassing roughly 70 acres, 28 hectares. Its walls, between about 16 and 62 feet, 5 and 19 meters, tall, form a perimeter of approximately 8,200 feet, 2,500 meters. Within the Kremlin's walls are 4 cathedrals, 5 palaces, and numerous state offices. The walls are adorned with 20 towers, the tallest of which is about 260 feet, 80 meters, high. The Kremlin sits atop Borovitsky Hill in the middle of Moscow, a budding red square, a massive open plaza that separates the fortress from the rest of the city. The site of the Kremlin has long been occupied and likely had some structures built upon it as early as the 10th century. Its history as a government center began in 1156, when Prince Yuri Vladimirovich Dolgoruki founded the city of Moscow. He had a force of workers build the Kremlin's first walls, of wood. After they were burned down by the Tatar, Mongol, army during its invasion of Russia in 1236–40, Ivan I had sturdier walls, of oak and stucco, erected about 1340. In 1367 and 1368 Prince Dmitry Donskoy rebuilt the walls, using white stone. By this time, the Kremlin had become home to Russia's major political and spiritual organizations and had come to include residences and workshops as well. In the late 15th century the Kremlin was rebuilt and assumed a new appearance, becoming the now iconic red brick compound that has dominated the site to this day. The Tsar Ivan III, the Great, aiming to create what he referred to as a Third Rome, invited Italian architects to design a new complex. They built the new fortress out of red brick, a material more common in northern Italy and theretofore unseen in Moscow. They also erected 2 of the 3 major cathedrals on the Kremlin's Cathedral Square, the 5-domed Dormition Cathedral and the Cathedral of St. Michael the Archangel. Italians also designed one of the complex's oldest civil buildings, the Palace of the Facets. The Dormition Cathedral would become the chief seat of the Russian Orthodox Church. Many coronations and royal weddings have been held in its frescoed interior. The Cathedral of St. Michael the Archangel is the burial site for many of Russia's most notable tsars and princes. The Palace of the Facets, also called Granovitia Palace, was used as a venue for celebrations and state affairs during the reign of the tsars. In the early 16th century the 270-foot, 82-meter, bell tower of Ivan the Great was built. It was the tallest building in Russia at the time. When the Tsar Peter the Great moved Russia's capital to St. Petersburg in 1712, the Kremlin continued to be a ceremonial and religious site. Coronations and weddings still took place there, but all government business was conducted at the Tsar's new capital. With the 1762 coronation of Catherine the Great, however, some state power returned to the Kremlin. She had the Senate divided into departments, 2 of which were housed in the Kremlin's new Senate building, which was completed in 1787. The Senate building is now the President of Russia's residence. In 1812 Napoleon I led his mostly French army into Moscow and occupied the Kremlin. His army was eventually forced to withdraw, but it laid mines throughout the complex during its retreat. While rains and a quick response by Russian troops saved many buildings, parts of the Kremlin were irreparably damaged. During the reigns of the Tsars Alexander I and Nicholas I, the Kremlin was rebuilt and expanded. In 1849 the Great Kremlin Palace, designed by Russian architect Konstantin Thun, was completed. The palace was an imperial residence, though the Tsar continued to lead the government from St. Petersburg in the years following its construction. During the era of the Soviet Union, 1917-22, 1991, the Great Kremlin Palace would be used for meetings of the Supreme Soviet, the state's legislative body. After the Russian Revolution of 1917, Moscow had again become the state capital. In the Kremlin many religious buildings were repurposed, and state treasures were used to fund building projects as palaces and churches became housing, workshops, and congress buildings. The churches of the Chudov and Ascension monasteries were destroyed to make way for new state structures. During World War II, in an effort to avoid German bombing raids, the Kremlin's towers were covered and its roofs painted in drab colors to match the surrounding city. After the war, Joseph Stalin had the Kremlin's walls painted red in an ode to communism. In 1955 the Kremlin was made an open-air museum, and much of the complex remains open to the public today. In 1961 the modernist state Kremlin Palace was completed despite a public outcry over its dissonance with the surrounding architectural styles. In total, the Soviet period saw 28 out of 54 historical buildings in the Kremlin destroyed. In 1990 the Kremlin was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site. About the Kremlin. The Kremlin, Kreml, is an iconic symbol of Russian statehood and forms the seat of its political power. Characterized by colorful domes and opulent buildings, this vast triangular-shaped complex, together known as the Kremlin, spans an area of around 28 hectares and includes several beautiful palaces, numerous churches, and even armouries and a medieval fortress. History of the Kremlin. The Kremlin's history can be traced back as far back as 1156, preceding even the founding of the Principality of Moscow in 1236. However, most of the buildings in the Kremlin were built between the 14th and 17th centuries, initially under the reign of Dmitry Donskoy, then rebuilt in the 15th century under Ivan the Great. It was also under Ivan the Great that the Kremlin served as the seat of Russian power, a role which it fulfilled until Peter the Great transferred the Russian government to St. Petersburg. It was only in March 1918, when the Bolsheviks chose Moscow as their political center, that the Kremlin once again took center stage. Cathedral Square. The Kremlin offers visitors a plethora of incredible sights. Many of these, including the Cathedral of the Assumption, which was built in the 1470s, are contained in Cathedral Square. Many of Russia's important religious leaders are buried here. Cathedral Square in the Kremlin was once a center of political and religious importance and the site of many significant ceremonies such as coronations. It is the home of what was once Russia's tallest structure, an imposing 16th-century tower known as Ivan the Great Bell Tower. This 81 meters high tower was largely destroyed in 1812 by Napoleon's army, but the main pillar remained and the whole structure was restored in the 19th century. The Cathedral of the Annunciation is another worthy site in this part of the Kremlin, built by Ivan III in the 15th century and once being the official chapel of Russia's Tsars. The Armoury. Beyond its religious sites, the Kremlin has much to offer the history enthusiast, notably in its armoury which contains a myriad of exhibits relating to Russian culture including ceremonial clothing of the Tsars, Fabergé eggs, the chalice of the founder of Moscow, Yuri Dolgoruki and, next door, the stunning Orlov diamond which measures a staggering 190 carats. The Communist Era. During the 20th century, the Kremlin became the focal point of Russia's communist regime, being the home of, amongst others, Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin. Both of these leaders unleashed waves of destruction upon the Kremlin's architecture, including demolishing monuments, such as one dedicated to Alexander II and buildings such as the Chudov Monastery. Today, the Kremlin contains the president's residences, including the Great Kremlin Palace, a 19th-century building constructed during the reign of Tsar Nicholas I, the Senate and the Kremlin Administrative Building. The Kremlin became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1990. The Kremlin today. Overall, the Kremlin is a fascinating site, having played a vital role throughout Moscow's social and political history. It contains several museums, some within its churches, whilst other exhibits are peppered throughout its grounds. The sheer beauty of its architecture makes the Kremlin an incredible place to visit and a must-see site when visiting Moscow. Unfortunately, some of its buildings, particularly its palaces, are not open to the public, but even given this, there is too much to see in one day. The complex is unsurprisingly under tight security measures. You'll need to check your bags, free, by the Kutafaya Tower before entering, and expect to see a lot of armed guards throughout your visit. They're unlikely to crack a smile and their English is limited, so avoid interactions where possible. Look out for the signs prohibiting photography, which includes the armory and the buildings on Sobernaya PL. The entrance ticket alone covers 5 church museums and the Patriarch's Palace, but if you've made it this far, you'll want to purchase the optional extras, the armory, Diamond Fund exhibition and even the Great Bell Tower. The Russian imperial treasures are truly a sight to behold, and should satisfy the diamond lust of even the most seasoned traveler. The armory holds the famous collection of Fabergé eggs, so keep an eye out for them. Tours are a great way to see certain parts of the Kremlin if you're short on time or feel overwhelmed. At noon daily you can watch the changing of the guards at Sobernaya SQ, which has plenty of horses and men in historical attire doing formal choreography. Red Square, open square in Moscow adjoining the historic fortress and center of government known as the Kremlin, Russian, Kreml. The Kremlin and Red Square were added to UNESCO's World Heritage List in 1990. Dating from the late 15th century, just after the Kremlin walls were completed, Red Square has long been a focal point in the social and political history of Russia and the former Soviet Union. It has had several names, but the present name has been used consistently since the later 17th century. Always a market area, the square has also housed, at various times, churches, Moscow's first public library and university, a public theater, and a printing house. Red Square has been the scene of executions, demonstrations, riots, parades, and speeches. Almost 800,000 square feet, 73,000 square meters, it lies directly east of the Kremlin and north of the Moskva River. A moat that separated the square from the Kremlin was paved over in 1812. The State Historical Museum, built 1875–83, stands at the northern end of the square. Directly opposite, at its southern end, is the 9-towered Cathedral of St. Basil the Blessed, originally Church of the Intercession, built 1554–60 to commemorate the defeat of the Tatars, Mongols, of Kazan and Astrakhan by Ivan IV, the Terrible. Nearby is a white stone platform, Lobnoye Mesto, dating from the 16th century. From there, edicts and decrees were read to the assembled masses, and once a year the Tsar would present himself to the people. Gum, the former State Department store, built 1889–93, privatized 1993, is on the east side, and Lenin's tomb, designed by Alexei Shchusev and completed in 1930, is on the west. Other graves near Lenin's tomb flank the spruce-lined Kremlin wall. In 1930 the cobblestone paving of Red Square was replaced with granite paving stones, and a monument to Kuzma Minin and Prince Dmitry Pozersky, leaders of the army that forced the surrender of Polish invaders in 1612, was moved from the center of the square to its present location in front of St. Basil's in order to facilitate parades and demonstrations. During the Soviet era, the annual May Day and October Revolution, November 7th Day, military parades were probably the best-known celebrations held in Red Square. Although they were discontinued after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, they were revived in 2008 by Press. Vladimir Putin. Thank you for watching this video.